Now, I've got a question for you. Why exactly do we wear clothes? Now, for me, what comes to mind is if it's cold, it will kind of keep me warm. And if it's a very sunny day, it keeps the sun off and I don't get burnt. So clothes for me is something that adds protection. It protects my skin. Now, the other thing it does is I've got a lot of imperfections under my clothes, and what it does is it hides the imperfections and it projects an external experience that may not reflect what the internal is all about. But nevertheless, that's what clothes do. So just by putting some nice clothes on, I can transform the way that I look to others. And on roofs, we can do much similar things. A lot of people paint their roofs to make it look better, although I don't think it's a good idea. But fascia covers, that's something that can really transform the look of your roof. And not only that, it will actually protect the fascias, the timber fascias that will rot with weather. Now, for most houses here in Sydney, the fascias are done in timber. Then there is the ongoing maintenance issue of getting that timber protected. So you always have to paint the timber, especially at the end, so that the water doesn't get in, so you don't get the wet and dry cycle that will eventually start to rot the timber. So with fascias, with timber fascias, and with timber barges, you often have a rotting problem. The timber goes through this cycle of wetting and drying. You get the sun, you get the rain, and if you don't protect it with continuous application of layers of paint, you will start to get deterioration of the timber. So what is the solution? Well, we got to dress it up, much like we put clothes on. So the option is that you would cover the fascias with a metal fascia cover, with a colorbond pre-painted fascia cover, which will never need any painting, and it is weatherproof. So by the simple application of a colorbond fascia cover on top of the fascias or on top of the barges will be like putting clothes on, and it's going to protect and it's going to make it look good. Now, metal fascia covers are firstly designed to go on the fascias where the gutters sit. So that's one application of installing a fascia cover. You get a small portion of the metal fascia exposed below the gutter, and it gives you a much better look, and you don't need to paint the fascia. Now, the other area where you would use a fascia cover is not strictly a fascia, but at a barge end of a roof. And the barge ends on the roof are much more exposed and it's a lot more prominent. So we've got to be able to retrofit a standard fascia cover into a barge that will make it look good and also make it work efficiently. Now, timber barges usually occur at gables on a roof, and usually it's the front-facing gable that's the most critical because that's what people look at. And gables on a tiled roof comes in a couple of different forms. They are bedded and pointed, and where there's bedding and pointing on the gables, some have a Z flashing already installed and some don't. So where there's no Z flashing installed, you would butt the top of the fascia cover up underneath the fibro strip. Not exactly an ideal situation because you may get some water going behind the fascia, but it's not a lot of water, so you don't get a lot of weathering. So there's still a major protection factor involved in covering the barges where there's no Z flashing. Now, where there is a Z flashing, there's two ways you can do it. If it's a totally new renovate, you would install the fascia cover over the timbers, then put the Z flashing over the top, and then bed and point. And sometimes when we find a gable that's already got a Z flashing, the challenge is to be able to get the new fascia cover behind the lip of the Z flashing, and If we can do that, then that's a very neat way of retrofitting a fascia cover onto a barge that's already got a Z flashing. Under the Z flashing, right there. Now, some spots you won't really get, so this is what you do. Now, there's another variant of the gable where it's not bedded and pointed, and the tiles are cut up to the back of the barge, and then there's a cover timber placed on top. And the cover timber tends to rot and deteriorate and continuously need to be replaced. So the option here is to take the cover timbers off and put in a soaker. The other way to do a barge is to put a soaker flashing in, and this is what a soaker flashing looks like. So the detail is different, there's no bedding anymore. The soaker flashing is put in, and then the tiles slid in, it sits on, it's hooked onto the batten, and any water that falls down there runs down the barge flashing. There's a hook in there and it catches the water. Now, a soaker barge has got tiles cut up to it, and the soaker takes the water to the gutters. So to treat this style of a barge configuration with a new fascia cover, we would then install a barge soaker on top, and it dresses up quite neatly, much like what this is. It started off with a cover timber, and then we put in a barge soaker on top. So on this particular job, we went from there to there. So much as clothes are used to protect our skin and to hide all the imperfections behind the clothes, we can use colorbond fascia covers to protect the rotting timber barge boards and the rotting timber fascias. And then there's no need to know what's actually behind the fascia covers, because one, now it's protected and it won't deteriorate anymore. So the whole thing is functional. You got something that looks good, needs minimum maintenance, and then provides the long-term protection for everything that is behind it.